Hi everyone, welcome to the Glasgow Clubbing Podcast. My name is Soban.
My name's Nick.
And welcome to episode 4, where we have Rebecca Vasmant on the show today. Rebecca is a DJ, producer and record label boss. So everyone, big cheer for Rebecca Vasmant.
Thanks for having me. Your podcast has been doing so well. It's been so nice to see, and I'm delighted to be on.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for coming on, Rebecca. Rebecca, so a good place to start is just to tell us about your earliest memories of getting into music.
So my earliest memories of getting into music was my grandmother is a ballroom dancer, so she goes all around the UK and Europe and competes ballroom dancing as like a sport. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was really wee, we used to go and watch her in competitions and support her and all that, and they used to play really loud over the sound system the songs that they would do their competition dances to. And there was this one song, and it was like a Latin song. And I remember for the first time ever, I must have been about 7 or 8, getting goosebumps from the music and thinking, oh, like I just felt something. Or maybe I wasn't old enough to think that, but I was like, whoa, I was so blown away. The second time was in the cinema where there was an advert for like chocolate or something, and they were blasting a Latin tune again. And I was like, whoa, I got goosebumps again. And then after that, my big brother, he was a skateboarder, professional skateboarder, and he used to travel to America. And this was before the days of the internet. And he used to bring me and my little brother tapes of hip hop. So, of course, this was before the days of Spotify, Discogs. You know, I wasn't old enough yet to go clubbing or be record collecting or anything like that. And I remember being so blown away by this music, the hip hop on the tapes, taking it into, well, it's probably primary school at that point, showing it to my wee friends and them not really being as bothered by it. So to me, I was absolutely fascinated by the concept that I was so interested in this and they weren't bothered. So it made me feel at the time bad because I felt like I was different. But I honestly think that's my first memories of feeling my level of obsession towards music was different to other people.
Yeah.
And it, in a way, at that point, it made me feel outcasted. But now, obviously, it's formed this, you know, lifelong thing, which is great. But yeah, those three things are definitely the key early points where I think I had my entry into
Where
music.
did you grow up, Rebecca?
I grew up in Fife, in a tiny countryside village near Dunfermline.
Fife for life?
Fife for life, aye. Went to a tiny primary school. I'm pretty sure the whole primary school was like 60 kids. And then moved to Edinburgh when I was 18 and was in Edinburgh for around 5-ish years. And then came to Glasgow where I've been for, I think I calculated it's around 17 years now.
So Rebecca, just to, I think you also mentioned before that your mum was quite an influence in you getting into music. You said your mum was into dance music and stuff.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So my mum actually had me and my brother really, really young, and my mum and dad broke up when I was around 11. So my mum rediscovered her clubbing days when we used to be at our dad's for the weekend. So when we would be in my mum's car, she'd been going out and going raving all weekend, and she'd be playing these amazing like trance and techno mixtapes in the car. And I remember this memory of me and my brother singing to what's now actually quite an obscure tune. I can't remember what it is, but one of these like trance tunes that's got like a vocal over it. Quite underground music actually. And me and my brother knew all the songs. We'd like dance in the back of the car. So yeah, my mum was a massive influence. And I think my mum took me out to my first ever house music night in Edinburgh. We went to this night called Ultra Groove. Gareth Somerville was the DJ. And I remember being absolutely blown away by the house music because at the time I was still heavily into hip hop. Because as I said, obviously my brother had showed me hip hop. But I actually went into the house room and danced for like an hour and was hit by the energy and how everybody's energy on the dance floor was just together. They were like focused in. This was before folk camera phones as well, before I had the first iPhone. You know, everybody was just so present, and I was just so taken aback by this like oneness of the energy. And it was like, when I walked into the room, it just hit me. And I pretty much think at that point, I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be playing tunes on that decks, on that stage or whatever. So yeah.
So Rebecca, when you obviously got into music at a very early age, right? What did you do at college or university?
So I left school and I knew that I wanted to do something in music because I'd been obsessed by these adverts on TV where people were DJs, right? And I knew the concept of a nightclub, but I was a kid, so, you know, it was kind of like this thing that I didn't really fully understand. And the thought of being able to share the music that I knew and loved with other people, just the thought of it just gave me such a buzz. And so at the time I thought I wanted to be a presenter. I thought I wanted to do radio or TV, like music TV shows or radio shows. So I went and I did radio production. And as part of my radio production course, I got a placement one day a week at Kerrang Radio, which was like a rock radio station. Now, on the same street as the radio studio, there was the Hard to Find Records warehouse, which was a massive shop. I don't know, do you remember?
Where was it? Of course I do.
Hard to Find.
I think it's
in
still
Birmingham.
going.
Is
Yeah.
it? Right, cool. So there was the warehouse and a huge record shop, massive. So me with my student loan, I would buy my train ticket to Birmingham.
You won't have much of that loan left. I can see that coming.
And I started buying like 1 or 2 records every week that I went down. And there was actually decks in the radio station, and they told me, oh, you can, you know, use the decks. So I had my 2 records, one house music record, the other house music. All I had was 2 records, and I was like, right. I didn't know anybody that was a DJ. I didn't even really know what you had to do or the concept. I hadn't really, you know, I guess at the time YouTube tutorials were a thing, but I didn't really know about them. This was even before Bebo. It was like still MySpace time. And I was just like, I'm going to learn how to mix. I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know how I'm going to get my first gig, but I'm going to do it. So I eventually bought belt drive Newmark decks.
That's how to learn.
Cash converters, paid it up with my student loan, eventually paid off the decks, collected them from cash converters, had this old amp and speakers that my dad gave me that was like my granddad's, and basically just started, I don't know, just trying to do stuff. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew that eventually I would learn, but my flatmate at the time, I remember being raging because he was a guy and he was also he was going on the decks at the same time as me. And I think he must have got his first mix in time in about 2.5 weeks. And it took me, I would honestly say, about 6 full months before it clicked.
Yep.
I was just trying. And I think maybe I gave myself quite a hard time because he learned really, really faster, and it didn't come naturally to me, and it was quite a fight. So did my first mix, it clicked. I started like understanding what to do.
I mean, within that, to talk about it,
Yeah.
what you have to do, because it's changed now because of CDJs.
Yeah.
But back then, especially on belt drives,
It was hard.
You have to separate your ears.
Yes.
So basically, one ear has to hear one record,
Yeah.
and one ear has to, and it can
Yes.
take. I think I was a similar length
Were
of
you?
time
Okay, that
in
makes me
order
feel
to
good.
do it. Yeah.
that
I
makes
was.
me feel good.
What kind of
actually.
records, Rebecca, were you trying to mix with initially?
So I was buying, and now actually it makes sense, and I've still got all those records. I love them. It was old Chicago house music with lots of vocals and jazz samples and flutes and trumpets and stuff. And it was like this label called OM. It was called
Yes.
like OM. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And it was like, what was it, like DJ Colette and all this
Yeah.
stuff? Quite jazzy, actually. And then I went on to like, I guess, a bit hard-edged stuff. So it was like a bit more like jacking stuff, like Derek Carter remixes and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I maybe had like, I don't know, 20, 30 records. And I was like, right, I'm going to curate a set. I'm going to do it. And I was already going out clubbing in Edinburgh. By this point, I'd moved to Edinburgh. I'd got a flat with this friend of mine who was also learning to DJ on the decks. And bold as brass, went into this club, went up to the promoter and just told him I was a DJ, even though I wasn't already, and said, can I get a gig? And he was like, fair enough, bring me a mix. And so then I was like, right, my task is to now be able to mix for an hour without making a mistake and curate an hour worth of records that sounds good together. So that was obviously a massive task.
Yeah.
So I think that must have taken me about a month and a half, because I just like worked like a crazy person at it. Got my mix, recorded it, put it on a CD, brought it into the club and was like, oh, like, yeah, right, here's my mix. And he was like, cool, I'll listen to it. And I wrote my phone number on Sharpie on the, on the front of the CD, because like that was what you did. And must have been about a week later, he phoned me and he said, right, I'll give you a trial. So this was in Cabaret Voltaire. It was a weekly night, every Tuesday, called Split, that was techno in the main room and, drum and bass in the main room and techno in the back room. Every week, queued around the street. Just crazy, crazy busy. So he gave me my first trial shift, and I remember that night there was Claire, aka Claire Fifi, who was also a resident there. And she was like, what, there's another girl? What? I don't understand. How's there another girl? So that in itself shows that at that time it was quite rare for, females to be DJing. And I played my first set, and then he basically said, right, come back every week. So I honestly think that I learned to read crowds. I learned how to curate sets. I learned how to really change up a tune if it doesn't work according to if people leave or stay, because we were always in competition with the drum and bass room, which was why everyone was there, but people would come in the back room if it was good enough. And then I was playing there every week. And during the time I was playing there, I'd started coming through to Glasgow for nights out. I'd been going to the sub club, listening to Harry and Dom. I think I went to Archaeos a couple of times, but the music was too heavy. I started getting slowly into techno, but that was heavy. That was really, really heavy, hardcore techno-ish stuff. And I got it into my mind, right, the music scene's amazing in Glasgow, I want to move here. And pretty much, I honestly feel that I manifested moving, because pretty much a couple of days later, one of my best friends who already lived in Glasgow called me and she said, oh, we've just had one of our housemates who's going to move out. We don't have the money to cover the rent. We need someone straight away. And that night I went, I'll pack my stuff, I'll move tomorrow. So I just packed my stuff and moved came through. I think my boyfriend at the time drove me in the car, and I had all my stuff in Royal Mail postie sacks, because my boyfriend at the time was a postie. We moved me into, it was a tiny box room in a flat on Sauchiehall Street, and I was absolutely buzzing that I was in Glasgow. I was so happy.
So Rebecca, you started to get your first gigs.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, you went to Ibiza.
I did. So I was doing this weekly residency in Cabaret Voltaire, where I was kind of learning how to read crowds and stuff. And I decided that I would go to Ibiza and try and do the whole DJing in Ibiza thing, do a season.
What age were you here?
I must have been 20, 21. And what I did was I actually used my MySpace to make it look like I was already a successful DJ, even though I wasn't. I actually played the game quite well from early on. I'll give myself credit for it. And messaged a bunch of clubs, and what I did was I made a mixtape which was more techno-y, because at the time, what was in fashion was minimal techno.
Yes.
So I had been buying records slowly at the hard-to-find warehouse, and also at Underground Solution in Edinburgh when I was there. And I made a mix that was a bit more techno-y, and basically just typed out a message and sent it to loads of clubs on MySpace. But because my MySpace page made it look like I was already really successful, they bought it. And I got invited to do a trial, DJ shift, if you like, for this Zoo Project party, which at the time was the best party on the island. Massive, yeah. And I also had a trial DJ shift for this gig called Charlie's Angels, which was a female-only night in San Antonio.
Fantastic.
And basically arrived at Ibiza, but before that I was oh God, who am I going to go with? None of my friends were into the whole clubbing thing. I was just totally out on my own with this. I joined a Facebook group for people that wanted to go and do a season in Ibiza, but I had no friends to go with. And I befriended this random girl on the group, and we were talking on the phone, getting to know each other. And we basically booked an apartment to share together, just went, never having met her, stayed over at her mum and dad's house the night before, had dinner with her mum and dad. They drove us to the airport, and off we went. I had a suitcase full of vinyl. It was overweight, so I had to pay money to get it on the plane and all this. So ridiculous. Didn't even own a record bag. Just literally had vinyl and headphones. That was it. Bikinis, vinyl and headphones.
That's all you need.
Well, basically, yeah. Arrived in Ibiza, did my DJ shift at Zoo Project, bombed it. I was so nervous that I bombed it. And I remember that they called me in for a meeting the next again day, and they were like, yeah, we're really sorry, but you were just really bad. And me being oh, I've lost my chance. Really gutted. Went and did the DJ trial for the Charlie's Angels night, got that, that was fine. I ended up actually getting a sunset DJ gig for one of the smaller bars near Cafe Mambo on that strip bit. There was one bar that was like smaller and less well known, but it was still on that desirable bit. So I did every single lunchtime and every single sundown, and it was actually really well paid. They paid me in cash. I think it was like €10 an hour, which at the time was like, yes.
Yeah.
It was more than the ticket selling jobs.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing anything illegal, which a lot of young people resorted to doing out there.
What was it like, Rebecca? See, when you first arrived in Ibiza, a young person, pretty much by yourself, can you just kind of paint a picture of how that felt? Because a lot of people will make that journey, seemingly, of course, to try and chase a dream, which is what you were doing. Yeah. What was it like? So what year was this, and what was it like to arrive there? You know, I presumed, had you travelled much before? Just paint a picture.
I'd basically never travelled on my own before, so it was really, really scary.
Very brave.
Yeah, I think it was quite brave. I think it is. I think I was really scared. I was terrified. The lead up to it was all this build up and meeting this girl. I didn't know if we'd get on. She was like my only chance at a friend and all this kind of thing. She was lovely though. So when I arrived, I remember putting my suitcase down, going for a walk down the strip and being like, this is it. This is the start of my adult life. This is the start of my career. This could change my life. It was kind of like stars in my eyes, like, oh my God, I've made it. I've came here. I was like really proud of myself that I'd done this massive, scary thing. It was scary, but it was exciting. And I just remember being really focused on why I went there. So very quickly I realised all the people that I met were there to party, to have fun, to go to clubs, to drink, all that kind of thing. But me, I was like, no, I'm here to DJ. I'm here to make my name. I'm here to give a good impression. I wanted to come across as professional. I'd obviously already, had some experience in Scotland at what goes on in the clubs and things like that. And I actually think very quickly I realised I kind of knew who I was already at quite a young age. I knew what I wanted and I knew who I was as a person. And I felt like I met quite a lot of lost people and people that were out there to just kind of be something, but they didn't really know what they wanted to be. And I felt really like kind of self-secure in myself that I was there and I was focused and I was achieving my dream. And I remember this one night I was DJing and the sun was going down and I was playing For Hero, of course, that version of Black Gold of the Sun, For Hero remix, and looking out and just being like, this is amazing.
And of course that must have affected, because if you're playing at sunset, then that affects what you play.
Yes.
And obviously you put your own mark on it.
Yeah.
But that's a different type of set, so you would progress as a DJ.
Absolutely. I think those the lunchtime and the sundown shifts probably was the entry into the concept of DJing, but not for people to dance.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's for people to dance, but it's for people to enjoy a moment. So I think that added a new depth to the way that I thought about curating sets, in the sense that yes, it is to make them dance, but it's not banger, 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 because as
You're
a young...
not trying to hold a dance floor.
Yeah, exactly, because up to then it was all about holding a dance floor, making people dance, keeping the energy up, And I think after then, I started curating my sets in a way where there was gaps, there was breaks, it was like ebbs and flows, and that really taught me, I guess, that part of there was no crowd reading involved, so it was easier to just focus on the actual music, which was also really nice.
It seems like, Rebecca, from doing the gigs in the Cabaret Voltaire and these gigs in Ibiza, it seems like it was a proper education and learning curve for you in terms of how to create sets. And something which a lot of young people might not do so much these days, but it seems like you really went to school in some way.
I think what I wanted to do was immerse myself in learning as much as I possibly could about DJing. Like, I wanted to be good. And my early experiences in Edinburgh were really being outcast for being a woman, being outcast for, there was a lot of times where we'd be in social situations and people's girlfriends would not be happy that I was playing at their boyfriend's nights because they were like, you're chatting up my boyfriend, like lots of things like that.
Yeah.
So I was very outcast from the Edinburgh scene. I wasn't welcomed. I fought my way in and I fought myself those opportunities, and all the men in the scene just didn't like it. They made it very, very clear. And I could honestly count on one hand or less the men in the scene that actually helped me to progress. But after I did my seasons in Ibiza, I came back and I decided I was going to take the plunge and move to Glasgow, because one of my friends, she had a room free in her flat, and I just jumped at the chance and took the opportunity. I'd already been coming through to Glasgow clubbing. I'd already probably spoken and said hi to like Harry and Dominic, told them I was a DJ. I was doing my whole like networking thing. And I came to Glasgow and did what I did for Ibiza. I messaged loads of bars, loads of nights. I got booked through Gary Lawson, who you guys were running the Let's Go Back night.
Yeah.
So Gary Lawson put me on at the Brunswick Hotel, probably the first week that I moved here. And there was me and Harry from the subclub's son, Jasper. And at the time, Jasper was like 16, 17. And me and Jasper, it was Jasper, then it was me. Because at the time, they were like, you know, I was the bigger DJ. What a mad concept. Jasper's absolutely smashed it, is like, right? So Harry was there, and Harry actually came over and said how much he loved my music, gave me his number, said, I want to give you a hand, I want to help you out. If there's anything I can do, just let me know. And we stayed in touch. Pretty much once a week, he would message to see how's it going, have you got gigs, how's the DJing going.
Fantastic.
Gary Lawson, and then subsequently Colin Barr, actually, because Colin Barr was there that night. They just all were like, we want to help you. Let's get you in. Let's get you, like, you know, make you part of the scene.
I think we've got to, I mean, because times have changed. Certainly back then, it was quite rare. There was certainly female DJs, but, you know, not in the number that there is now.
Absolutely.
Thankfully, things have changed.
Yeah.
But I can remember the time, because I can remember...
Do you remember first meeting me? What's your impressions?
Well, I thought you were very driven. You know, you came to Glasgow, you made an impression straight away. You were driven. I mean, I would say you were welcomed in Glasgow.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
I mean, we DJ'd it and loads of things. You know.
Yeah.
Say to touch on that being driven, right? About getting those gigs in Edinburgh and then going to Ibiza pretty much yourself, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Can you kind of maybe enlighten us a bit of where do you think that comes from? I mean, can you tell us maybe, you know, your family background or whatnot?
Yeah, so I've thought quite deeply about this, and I actually think that my intense ambition comes from my ancestors on both sides. They had struggles in the past. So my family on both sides are Jewish, and they essentially were Holocaust survivors that escaped going to concentration camp. They then went on to making a really successful fashion business that was like in Paris Fashion Week and all that. They moved from Poland to France. They got hidden in the war. I honestly think that that's in there from them, and it was born down. I really do believe that we inherit some stuff from our, you know, grandparents and great-grandparents. And in a way, I do think that my incessant drive comes from somewhere that's not me, because it's so strong. I still have it. I'm almost 40. I mean, I'm almost 40 and it's still there. It's never went away.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing and it's a curse. I mean, I've sacrificed, you know, I've never been married. I've never had kids. I don't actually want kids. I do want to be married. I've never done any of those things because me having this incessant drive for doing music and that being my priority, it's lost me friendships, family relationships, because I'm like, no, this is the most important thing in my life. And now that I am quite a lot of years down the line, I am sitting here able to say now I have a personal life, but I sacrificed personal life for all those years.
To touch on, obviously, being a female in a scene which is full of males.
Yep.
That must have also drove you in some way, because
absolutely.
when you talk about people in the past.
I mean, did you find, like...
Well...
I mean, did you find barriers put up? You've obviously mentioned some, but I mean...
Absolutely,
it was not all sweetness and light, surely, you know?
Oh, yeah, I faced a lot of barriers. So there's actually a conversation between me and you that's a really... It was quite instrumental in me realising what this all has been and how I've handled it. So me and you were DJing at the junkyard thingy, right?
Yeah.
And you came up to me and you said, Rebecca, I think it's fucking amazing because you're just so respected by everybody, and it's just you're basically just one of the lads. And at the time, I was like, wow, what a compliment. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, really. Because, like, you accepted me as one of you. Gary accepted me. The sub club, you know, I went on to be a regular at the sub club. Like, everybody just, like, accepted me. But I honestly think that how I did that was I masculined myself. Like, I've always worn, like, this is quite feminine now because I'm older. But if you remember, I used to wear men's clothes. I used to wear trainers. I used to have my hair scraped back. The way that I acted was quite like, oh yes, you know, quite like Jack the Laddie. I think what I was doing was imitating.
You fitted right in.
Well, exactly, that's it. So I think what I did was I kind of imitated the masculine side of all of you guys and put that out in myself so that you could relate to me.
Yeah.
And you guys all accepted me as one of you.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I've thought about this as well. With, you know, dating and relationships, I've never had a relationship with anybody in the music industry in Scotland before because I was one of the lads. And that in itself is quite like, you know, I guess you could say that that's a barrier because if I'd been myself and if I'd been my true feminine self, I wouldn't have got taken seriously. And I remember when I first moved to Glasgow, I used to turn up to gigs in quite feminine stuff, and then I stopped doing that, and I noticed an immediate difference.
So you think people took you more seriously if you dressed perhaps more masculine, for the lack of a better term?
Yeah, I mean, I was buying full head-to-toe men's Carhartt stuff. I was dressing like a skateboarder. I was wearing, you know, men's shirts buttoned up to the top. I never had my figure showing. I just disguised myself completely because it made a huge difference in how I was perceived by both the promoters that were all male, but I was then not a threat to everyone's girlfriends because that stopped me quite a lot of times.
That's quite a lot to have to deal with when all you want to do is
Huge
DJ.
I mean,
guys don't have to deal with
hopefully
that.
things have changed. We really, you know, to that because as female DJs have become more and more prevalent over the last 10 years. But I mean, what a struggle actually to go through.
I mean, it didn't feel like a struggle, and it's never. There has been a few, you know, clear-cut things that have happened that have felt quite like a struggle. But I think for me, it's been really, yes, it's created barriers. Absolutely, it's created barriers. But there's been a lot of positives, like how welcomed I was when I came to Glasgow. But one thing that did happen in between all of this is I was doing a residency. My first big residency that I got after Ibiza and while I was just recently in Glasgow is that I was doing a residency for Ministry of Sound. So that residency was a world tours residency. So basically what that meant was I was flying all over the world under the Ministry of Sound banner. I kind of got scouted on Facebook by this, like, you know, music management company. They messaged me. And they said, hey, we're looking for a new resident that plays a bit more underground music and a female, so can you make us a mix? So I made them a mix. They called me 2 weeks later, invited me down. It was like something out of a movie, honestly. I went down on the train. There was like a big table like this, everybody exchanging business cards, like this is your tour manager, this is your booker, this is your like wardrobe person, all this crazy stuff. And pretty much the following week, I was off to India on a 5-city tour. So I was living my dream, right? However, what I learned later was that they were not paying me all the money that I was earning. They were trying to carve me into something that they wanted me to be. So the first photo shoot that I did for Ministry of Sound, they had a wardrobe for me and it was like really low cut, like sequenced dresses. There was a hairdresser there. There was a makeup person there. And I remember that I was like, nope, I've got my fancy Adidas trackie. I'm zipping it up to the top. I'm not having cleavage. I knew very early on that if I put myself out like that, I would not be respected because men don't respect. Now it's obviously different, but back then I would have been perceived as, oh, she's just trying to get gigs because she's hot or whatever, you know. And that was said to me quite a lot of times, even though I was wearing trackies and stuff. But the point I'm making is,
So you refused to wear those?
Yes, I refused.
And I mean, that's pretty strong because, I mean, maybe not as well known now. Back then, you know, that was a big deal. That was a big
Ministry of
label,
Sound, yeah.
nightclub and
I mean,
such like.
I do want to kind of go into that in a bit more detail,
Yeah,
Rebecca, right?
sure.
So you went down by yourself, right?
Yeah, to London again.
And you had effectively an interview,
Yeah.
a meeting with one of the biggest music brands in the industry.
Yeah.
You were by yourself. You
Yeah.
must have felt intimidated.
Absolutely, 100%.
Right.
It was scary. I was young, but it was a kind of pathway into my dream, which
Yeah.
was being a touring DJ.
And that's how it must have felt to you. You must have felt like you'd kind of hit jackpot.
Oh, yeah.
Can you go into a bit more detail about that? I mean, that initial, because it must have been exciting, that initial experience of starting to DJ for a brand like the Ministry of Sound, and from being a DJ in Glasgow
Yeah.
to now being on this kind of tour with the Ministry
Yep,
of Sound.
yep.
Go into detail about that, because it'd be interesting to hear how that was and how that felt, because you must have felt like...
Especially going to India.
Yeah, no,
What was
I
that
went
like?
the first time. It was amazing, actually. It was. I think for me, right, it was a double-edged sword, because I already had kind of crafted out my sound, which was very specialist, you could say, compared to Ministry of Sound. It was house and techno and stuff like that. And I was hired as the underground music resident, or DJ resident for Ministry of Sound. And when I went, I very quickly realised that music didn't fly with the crowds, because the crowds were there for Ministry of Sound music, which was, trance remixes of all the pop hits,
Yeah.
but back to back to back to back. And there was always me and two other residents. And it was quite difficult in many ways. Number one, because I felt like I was living my dream and I was loving it. But my mind was very much on how was I being perceived in Glasgow, because I was trying to make my name in Glasgow. Everybody was seeing these Ministry of Sound gigs. And I remember I became friends with Keith McIver, actually, from Optimo. And we were having a chat one night at his house or at an afters or something. And Keith said to me, don't worry, because everybody knows that this is a stepping stone for you. Everybody knows, and, you know, doors aren't going to be closed.
What age were you?
I started that residency at 22.
22, right? So you're
22.
22 and you've got a residency with the Ministry of Sound.
Yeah.
That's
It was massive.
pretty
yeah.
good going.
Yeah.
It was
Tell
great.
us.
And I was flying all over the world and it was great, but it was really difficult. The travel schedules were hectic. Sometimes it was 5 flights to get somewhere, because obviously the promoters were doing the cheapest option. I wasn't yet old enough to know how to advocate for myself. I wasn't questioning any of the fees. I mean, whether I went on a 5-city tour or whether I went on one gig, it was the same money. It was always X amount of money, which was tiny, by the way. I was struggling to pay my rent. I couldn't, buy food. I was living off cereal. It was amazing, but at the same time, I knew something wasn't right.
Right, yeah.
I knew something wasn't right, and I think when I started to ask questions was when the demise happened. So basically, they realised that I realised, and I actually sent an email to the CEO questioning it. The next day, sacked. Residency over, and the guy that was my tour manager at the time, which was booking all the gigs, left, quit Ministry of Sound after 27 years, which I later discovered they were docking 80% of my money and keeping it.
Wow.
And the management company that recruited me was actually, and I didn't know this, best mates with the guy that was the booker in the Ministry of Sound. So they were obviously half in the money. And if you think about, let's just say I did 57, countries, each of those, some of those were 4 and 5 gigs.
57 countries.
I think something along the line,
What?
47, 57.
That's incredible.
They probably took enough for me to buy a house from me. And when I questioned it, there was absolutely nothing I could do. Absolutely nothing. And I was threatened by, we've got a legal team. There was emails sent, which were quite threatening. I was young at the time and I just wanted to kind of walk away from the drama. I remember Dave Clark actually said, right, that's it, I'm going down there and I'm turning up at their door. I mean, it never happened, so I didn't let him, but he was like, this is wrong,
Yeah.
this is...
You were effectively exploited.
I was exploited, yeah. I was massively exploited. And I honestly think that I went through a process of grief after that, because I was living my dream. I'd got this amazing residency. I was flying all over the world. And when the realisation hit that the only reason I had all of those things was because they found someone they could exploit, that was a really hard pill to swallow, and actually massively affected my confidence, my mental health, everything, for realistically probably 2 years after that.
Uh-huh.
And then I started running a night in Glasgow at St Jude's with my friend JJ, and it was a house night, and we were booking like Terry Farley and Tom Middleton and stuff like that.
So after the Ministry of Sound, do you feel like being attached to a brand like that, which is obviously a bit more commercial,
Yeah.
do you feel like it had an effect on you getting certain gigs?
I thought at the time that it did, but I now think that there was a time period of, let's say, 2 years where that died down, and I was doing other things that replaced it out. And when people saw that I was doing stuff that was actually good, and me and my friend were quite ahead of the curve. We were booking, we had Jeremy Underground first, we had Fabio Monessi first, we had all these Italian house DJs that were running cool labels on vinyl only. I think people saw it for what it was, and also being in the scene, knowing loads of people, talking to people, word spreading. I think everybody, after a certain amount of time, realised that it was just a stepping stone that I was using it for. And eventually the doors did open. But yeah, it did take a couple of years, but I always knew that would happen, and I was prepared for that to happen. So that was kind of part of my plan, in a way.
Right, so tell us about the period after. You said you started your own night. Can you just tell us the name of that, and was that soon after, or were you doing a lot of gigs between doing this new night and the Ministry of Sound?
So
just kind of filling that kind of gap for us.
Yeah, so I pretty much immediately, when I finished, as I always do, right, we need to move on to the next thing, we're not staying stagnant. So I contacted this guy that I really loved his music, called James Johnson, and said, do you want to run a night? And he was like, yeah, sure. So we went and we booked a monthly night in St Jude's, I think it was. St Jude's, what a place. And we just planned the first 6 months. We booked guests, they were international guests. We begged, scraped and borrowed to manage to pay their fees. I remember multiple times going to my own bank to take out 60 quid because the door money wasn't enough and all this.
Welcome to promoting.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, just went straight into doing this house night. It was really, really good, had an amazing time, met so many people. In many ways that formed my, I guess, house music name in Glasgow, because before then, I guess people just thought of me as Ministry of Sound or New, or I don't really know what they thought of me of as. And I was playing techno quite a lot as well.
You were playing techno, I remember.
Played techno a lot, yeah. I still love techno.
But we all were.
Yeah, exactly. No, I still love techno. So, there was a period of about 2 years where I was running that night, and it was hard. It was amazing. It was all those things. But again, I think that formed my making my way in Glasgow off my own back rather than just off the back of the Ministry of Sound. Because I remember at the time I used to get people would queue to ask for pictures with me. I mean,
when you were a resident for the Ministry of Sound?
When I was a resident of Ministry of Sound, because that was the first kind of few years of Facebook, and I was putting all my travels on Facebook and people saw it. And I don't know, that would never happen now, but I guess I felt the decline, because when my residency stopped, I was back to playing in Glasgow, scrimping and scraping to run a night, having a hard time or a more difficult time. And yeah, it was kind of like a recalibrating time where it then took me on to the rest of my career, basically.
So to move on, you started doing this night in Glasgow. Can you maybe then start to go into how you kind of moved into the kind of jazz thing?
Jazzy thing, yeah. So at this point, when I was running the house night, I'd started buying jazz already, collecting jazz records, and it had been a few years that
Did you already have a love for jazz from previous, in your younger years?
So, no. However, what I now know is that I was really into hip-hop and house music, and even some of the techno stuff, that all of it was quite...
sampled jazz.
Yeah, all of it quite heavily sampled jazz, and there was a turning point where a friend of mine from Canada, just a DJ friend that I'd played with in London one time, sent me a YouTube clip of this one song. It's actually called Starless and Bible Black by the Stan Tracy Quartet. And I think I actually just sat there and was burst into tears and was this is it. This is what I've been looking for, because I felt like my taste was constantly moving back and forth, evolving. I was not changing my mind a lot, but I felt like I was trying to find my feet until that day.
I mean, things kind of drift if you DJ for a length of time.
Yeah.
You know, especially in Glasgow.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You know, there's house sets and there's techno sets as
yeah.
well. You know, so you flip between the two of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still do. This is the thing. I love techno. I love house. I love jazz. I love hip hop. I love Brazilian music. I love African funk. But I think that point was the turning point where I said, I want to be someone that can play all of those things in one set. So that was the turning point where I started thinking, right, how can I do that now? Because it's difficult. It wasn't really a thing. There wasn't really selectors. I mean, obviously there was Mark Robin, Nick Peacock, but they were very much like, they play jazz, you play house, you play acid house, you play this. And I did a mix, which I put online, and it was like ambient jazz it was like really intricate. I spent ages on it, and it had like samples from movies and political speeches and just like all these like things bridging the sections of the songs together. Put it on SoundCloud, and it just basically, well, I guess you could now say it kind of went viral. It had hundreds of thousands of hits. All these people just started asking me to go and DJ at nights. Oh, can you come and play here and just like play that stuff? So it started off very much playing really chilled out, down-tempo jazz, or playing house, or playing techno. But simultaneously during this time, I started doing a record fair in the sub club through flat sharing with the lovely Soban. Soban was working at the sub club at the time, and we did a record fair.
We've stayed together twice in two different flats.
Yeah. Or was it 3 flats? Twice, 2 flats.
It was 2 flats, I think, yeah.
So I started in the record fair. I was going down regularly to the sub club. I can't really remember when my first gig at the sub club was, but I think it was maybe a melting pot night or something where they invited me to play. And I started playing kind of regularly for the melting pot guys, and they booked Giles Peterson one night. So I was playing with Giles Peterson, and this one particular night, Giles had said that he wanted to do this like long set. So he wanted to do the first 3 hours, and I was to do the last 2 hours. So I was, oh my God.
No pressure there.
Yeah, and it was very last minute. And I think what happened that night was some kind of beautiful thing where he played quite housey and quite disco-y, and I went on and just went, nah, I'm jazzing it. I'm for the first time ever. And already at that point, I'd been playing quite regularly in sub club, and I was trying to like, you know, ebb in a jazz track here or there, but it usually just emptied it. It still wasn't really a thing that you could do, not on, you know, normal nights that weren't Giles Peterson nights. And this night, I went on and I literally played this track that's like an absolutely banging, like Latin dance floor thing where it's like drum hits like really, really fast, and a saxophone, and the guy's like screaming, and it's just like real high energy. And everybody went mental.
That's a fearless thing to do as a DJ. And obviously, Giles Peterson is known for jazz, but he wasn't playing jazz.
No, he wasn't.
So the temptation, especially since coming after a DJ as big as that, would be to kind of flow into that and to make that statement is pretty strong, especially on the last set.
Do you know what, though? I really felt like I'd been waiting for the right time, and something came over me, and I just thought, this is it. This is the time. Do it. Do it now. And
it would be an open-minded crowd there that could respond to that.
Exactly. So I played that set, and Giles was like, oh, you know, like, lovely to see you again. I'm going to go. My driver's waiting or whatever. And then I was like, looked around, and he was still there, and he was still there, and he was still there, and he just stayed for most of my set. And then our friend Kev, who was the, you know, artist liaison driver at the time, was texting me. I got all the messages when I left the club. Oh my God, Giles is like saying how amazing the set was. And the following year, he booked me for all of his festivals. Every single one of his festivals, nights in London, everything. He was like, you know, he followed me on Instagram. I was buzzing. That, to me, was the night that basically changed my life.
It feels like it was a fateful night, Rebecca, because it's really in this kind of part of your career. It seems like that was the moment, wasn't it?
And we've got Sub Club, Melting Pot. Me and Mark from Melting Pot actually had like a brainstorm one night, and Mark said, right, we need to put you in front of Giles Peterson. We need to make it happen. And it was Melting Pot that did it. So, you know, I'm hugely thankful to them. And then that night, Barry, one of the sub club owners, said, well, right, let's do a jazz night, because he saw it really, really worked. So we then started doing a night which was bi-monthly, I think.
That midweek?
Yeah, it was a Thursday night.
Thursday night, wasn't it? Yeah.
And we were booking jazz bands, and of course the sub club's got history with jazz. It used to be a jazz club in the 50s. And yeah, things just kind of grew from there. I think because I was doing a jazz night in the sub club, I started getting booked loads in London and in festivals. I just started getting booked for playing that music, and it went really fast actually, and which then leads us into COVID happening. And I'd already been learning how to produce for some years up to that point. I was making music, I was putting musicians on the music. It was kind of like electronic based jazz. I then got offered the opportunity to start a record label through K7, because K7 had obviously heard what I was doing and they wanted the Scottish jazz thing. So I released my own album in 2021 called With Love from Glasgow, which has like 25 young Scottish jazz musicians on it as like a showcase for the Glasgow jazz scene. And that again was a massive turning point. It changed my life. It put me from feeling like I had to ask for stuff to stuff coming to me, and that was probably the biggest turning point that I felt changed and like moved things like pretty much overnight massively. And I think it was the perfect storm. People were in their houses, they had time to receive new music, they had time to buy new music. It was a double whammy of me starting a record label and putting out my album. Giles supported it to the nines, played it multiple times, put it in all his end of year best album lists. Like, he did so much support for that, which I'm really grateful for, which would not have happened if I wasn't in front of him that night at the sub club and played that jazz banger. Maybe if I played a house track, he would have left. Like, who knows, you know? So I feel like in my career anyway, it's been these like series of like fateful moments that have been turning points. And if I hadn't made that decision then, this might not have happened, which led to this. And that one night in the sub club definitely turned everything.
So, Rebecca, from that then, you touched upon it there, you started to make music, right?
Yeah.
Can you kind of go into a bit more detail about the music you started to make? You've obviously got a band now.
Yeah.
So just tell us about the last, 4 or 5 years?
4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So I was trying to make music for 10 years. So I had Ableton, I was going on it a few hours a day. The music I was making was absolutely awful. So bad. In fact, I'll send you a clip so you can slot it in, you'll hear how bad it is. And just like wasn't getting anywhere. And I don't know, something obviously clicked at a certain point, and I eventually started finishing tunes. I'd finished an album, I'd been sending it to loads of labels, it just got rejected everywhere. And that's when K7 offered me this label, because they said, well, why don't you release it yourself and it can be the launch of a label. And from there, Mr. Scruff asked us to play it live at Manchester International Festival, because he was a fan of the album. So he contacted us and said, would you just do it live as a one-off? We were like, oh God, what a massive task. Well, okay, we'll do it. So we rehearsed for like a month, spent ages putting this together. It was a huge thing. Played it at Manchester International Festival, where everyone had to sit down or wear face masks if they stood up. You weren't allowed to dance yet. And then at the end of that gig, we just all turned to each other, everyone in the band, and said, let's just do this. That was brilliant. And then from there, we've played Ronnie Scott's, we've played Jazz Cafe, we've played in Berlin at Berlin Jazz Festival, we played the main stage at We Out Here, we've played pretty much every city in the UK. Not every gig's been busy, mind you, but some of them have been amazing. Yeah, it kind of was just another turning point where if Mr. Scruff, Andy, hadn't asked us to do that, I wouldn't have a band. I would never have done that off my own back. So, yeah, another turning point.
Bringing musicians and starting to work with musicians and other artists, do you feel that increased your music knowledge, your direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if I think about the trajectory of my career, all the moments that have led me to getting to the next point or turning points have all been due to collaboration. For example, when I first moved to Glasgow, yous were having me play at your night, which led to playing at another night and another night. And with producing the music and being in a band, it's exactly the same thing, but just on a different level. It's taught me about music production. It's taught me about music theory that I never knew before. It's taught me how people work together in bands with energies. I mean, being a band leader has been a huge learning curve. It's been insane. It opened my eyes to new ways of making music, new sounds, ways to kind of put people together to make the sound different, because each person on each track forms how the final thing sounds. And I just think collaboration is absolutely everything in the music industry. Even as DJs that aren't duos and that are on their own, you know, you've always got a partner that you're running a night with, or pals that are sharing your stories on Instagram, or even friends that come to your night. That's collaboration. If it wasn't for collaboration, none of the music industry would exist. And for me, it's been a huge part. It's been everything, really.
Yeah. And with the, I mean, because then once you've went into production, I mean, did you have any musical training?
No.
I mean, that's very common with a lot of dance music. Was it just done by sound?
It still is all done by sound, So I curate my music by sampling from my record collection. I'll take stuff in, I'll start making loops, I'll start making wee melodies, I'll take, you know, a keys chord, put it onto my MIDI, start playing in, you know, a melody with the chord. I'll then do drum patterns on my MPC. I essentially make the song that I want. The musicians then come in and either layer on the MIDI parts or replace out, depending on how it sounds, which is kind of really exciting because it's making a song that's like a live song out of just the idea in my head. And it took a long time to get to that point. And now, even on this album that I'm releasing very soon, I'm even singing a wee bit on it. I mean, I've got loads of effects and stuff over my voice, don't get me wrong. But I love writing poetry, so I write all the lyrics on all the music.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's just, it's really exciting to make something out of nothing. And for that to be something that exists in the world potentially forever, that's come from an idea in your head.
And do you think then the years of being a DJ and being a house or a techno DJ has affected your knowledge? Because you're coming, you're a musician, but you're coming at it through watching dance floors for how many years, and understanding how dance music works. Yeah,
definitely. I think one of the things that I guess makes me unique is that I am a DJ who's making jazz albums. I mean, it is quite mental. I don't know, what do you think about it? Well, what do you think other people think about it?
I mean, I remember at the time, you know, I remember you doing jazz, and I just thought, that's cool. You know, it's properly, that's eclectic. And it's just expanding knowledge and going into something, you know, and, you know, to make people dance to jazz, which was not a thing particularly at all, and certainly not back then. You know, it was quite revolutionary.
And I think that especially in the Glasgow scene, it's still not very much a thing, apart from at nights that are specifically, you know, to that thing.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's like, see, when we were talking to Keith, right, or whatnot, about, you know, in the kind of 80s and 90s, people, and you said yourself, people would play all sorts. And on any given night, you know. Why would people not want to play all sorts of different music? You know, why would you know? I mean, obviously there is. You can understand why you would want to have like a same sound throughout the whole night, but then again, you want to have nights where you can hear all sorts of different stuff. Surely,
of course.
I think the perception of being at a night and wanting to hear stuff, and then coming at it from being a DJ, is two separate things. So I think for me, I remember a conversation that I had with somebody, and this was said quite a lot of times over the years, is that I was at a party and somebody was sitting opposite me, and they were quite an influential person in the Glasgow music scene, and they said, "I just don't believe you. I just think you're disingenuous." And I was like, well, "What do you mean?" "Well, I mean, how can you like techno, house, and jazz? Like,
how could you not?" But I mean, when you look at house music particularly, and actually techno as well, but when you look at it, I mean, the influences on it, you could go back to like German, like new beat and such like as influences on, but jazz influence on house and techno has been immense.
I think, honestly speaking, if I was a man and I was doing all this, would that person have sat opposite me at that table and said that?
I very much doubt it.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And I think because I'm a woman and I'm doing this, it's taken me a lot longer to be respected as an eclectic DJ, if you like. And I've had to do things like release albums and work with musicians where now people just get it. Oh, that's mad Rebecca Vasmant, she plays jazz. You know, now it's like quite a cool thing, but for quite a long time it was like, oh, there's that the girl that plays jazz. It was a bit like, yeah, but she also plays step. We don't understand. I think people, they couldn't put me into a box, so it was harder to understand what I did, maybe because I was a woman, because if you're a man, you're a digger and a record collector and whatever you do is respected. But I think this comes back again to the societal perception of, I don't know, female artists and maybe, but females tend to play, if you look at the women in Scotland that have done really, really well, they do play one thing. It's house or it's techno or it's hardcore or it's whatever, rave music or whatever. It's eclectic to a point. But I think I was coming along and trying to do this thing that was quite widely accepted in London at the time, but just not really recognised or accepted here. And I think what has happened as a result is people quite often come up and say, oh, I really respect everything you've done. It's like really cool. Because I did actually just fight for it and I did just keep doing it and I did just keep trying to
I mean, Rebecca, this is very much like the sound of a trailblazer. Do you know what I mean?
That's actually really nice.
Like, you know, and just to kind of pick up on the fact that, can you tell us then therefore how you feel like perception of female DJs has changed throughout your career? Because obviously you said at the start of this conversation how there was only like you and Claire, whatnot, or maybe
and Maya, Nightwave as well.
If you know, it's a lot different now in terms of there's so many young females getting into the scene. Can you tell us how you've seen it change and what you think might have caused that change?
I think, for me, I saw it change massively during the COVID times. So there was a whole new wave of producers and DJs who were essentially learning in their bedrooms, who learned during the time that the world was closed and they had enough time to put their all into it. And I also think that
without the influence of anyone else.
Well,
for example, they couldn't be kind of like made to feel as if they, you know.
Yes.
Right,
Exactly.
Because they were in isolation, perhaps.
Exactly, and I think there's been a whole new generation of young DJs who have just quite honestly got the courage to do it, and they've paved the way for more and more and more, and it's been an amazing process. I think there was already a lot of female DJs in London and in bigger cities around the world, so I think a lot of people here probably saw that. There's, you know, this new thing with female DJ collectives and female producers, and I think that the music industry is just more accepting now of women coming and doing it, and I have noticed myself attitudes change towards me, and actually it's made my career a lot easier as the attitudes have changed.
I presume it has to be said also that with with social media having such a kind of like an outlet for people, you know, you're no longer, you know, at the, you know, for the lack of a better term, reliant in your local scene for support perhaps or encouragement. You can have yourself out there on social media and you can have people who would encourage you from a wider network. Yeah,
I mean, I think if you look at the way that the entry that I had, which I spoke about earlier, is I absolutely used social media as a way to make myself seem I was doing better than I did.
It's still in its early days. Social media.
And I think that now more and more people have seen that there's a way for you to make your name through putting yourself DJing on TikTok and all those things. And I honestly think it is amazing because it's allowing people to have access to that. And also the technology's changed. You don't need to play on vinyl now. You can have a wee controller that costs 200 quid. You can practice your sets. let's not get into this debate, but there's sync buttons on the CDJs now. Essentially, it's a lot easier now to come in and be a DJ, and that, okay, you could say, oh, well, it's not as good as the old days, nobody can mix, but you could also say it's paved the way for a lot of people who might not have had access before. Because I don't come from a family with any money, so I came from a very working class background, and also I think that's had a massive effect on how long it took me, because I only had CDJs in my house 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I've never been able to afford CDJs.
Of course.
So I practiced at gigs.
Yeah.
They were too expensive. They're thousands of pounds. I've never had enough money to buy those.
I think one of the things with going on from moving from vinyl to CDJs is the technology certainly does. You can remix tracks and make them into something else, vocals on top of them or on a different track. And I mean, I like playing on vinyl, and I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
But certainly, it's made what you can do as a DJ expanded massively.
100%, and I think it's made a lot of people be able to have access to being DJs and getting gigs and forming their own careers that might not have had access to it before, because of finances, because of just access to the equipment.
Even back then, Technics were expensive back then.
Yeah.
And as you said before, I mean, you seriously had to practice, and it could take up to 6 months, do you know what I mean? Like that sort of time for your ears to click.
Absolutely.
So you've got to have the decks in front of you.
Yeah.
So on this musical journey you've been on, Rebecca, we've got to ask, I mean, what is your favourite set to play? Is it house techno or is it jazz? I mean, when you've got a room, maybe unlike like the one that we're in just now, what's your favourite?
Honestly speaking, my favourite set is one of those sets where everybody is so receptive that you can play anything you want.
Yeah.
So it's not about me just playing jazz or house or techno. It's just one of these ones where people are so into it that I get completely into this like flow state, and sometimes I'll go techno into Tribe Called Quest, into jazz, into Latin, back into house, and for some reason it works.
Yeah.
And it's like that true, everybody being connected, everybody listening, and nobody really even hearing that it's went from one thing to the other because they're just so into it.
Yeah.
That's my favourite set.
So this moves on quite nicely to what advice would you give to young, aspiring female DJs who are just getting into the scene?
I would honestly say that for any young female DJs that have watched this, do it, ask for opportunities, play the game, do whatever you need to do and take your own path, because I've taken my own path and it's been really, really unique to other people's paths, but you will get there. Believe in yourself for sure, because you have to. But also be yourself, because when it comes to music trends and now there's like TikTok viral and all that kind of thing, don't look at what other people are doing. Do your own thing and make your own path and do it your own way. Don't worry about other people and just worry about yourself. I wish I could take my own advice. But yeah, I would say just,
Don't we all?
The music industry's got a lot better for young females coming through. I've certainly seen it year by year by year, and it's a lot more of a welcoming and equal place than it was. There's still a long way to go, long way to go. But yeah, I think we're in a much better place now. So for all the barriers I've accessed, might not be there anymore for other young women. Mm-hmm. We've got technology, we've got social media, we've got cheaper equipment. If you're sitting at home thinking, I would love to do this, you're the only one stopping yourself. So yeah.
On that note, Rebecca, look, thank you so much, okay? Such a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and you're an inspiration and a trailblazer, and you've really smashed it.
That's lovely.
In your career, and a true inspiration for us. Thank you so much to everyone for watching. Thanks to Rebecca. This has been the Glasgow Clubbing Podcast, episode 4. Until next time.
Thanks for having me.